Kia ora. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko arangi te manga, ko waimakarere te awa, no Aotearoa ahau, ko Jo Cribb tēnei. So I herald from the South Island, but as Belinda said, I am coming to you from a delicious Wellington Day, and I don't say those words very often, so it is a bit of a joy to do that. I just want to say thank you for giving your lunch hour to this, what I think is an incredibly important topic. And also just want to acknowledge, as you were coming in, I recognized a lot of names. And I just want to acknowledge the amazing work that you do every day in your organizations. And how a lot of the mahi that you do just holds our country together. And I don't think we say that enough. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up front while I've got the speaking spot so I can use it to do that. I don't have many slides today, don't worry. And I don't have a whole lot of numbers to throw at you, but I'm going to leave this background here, which is the figures on the gender pay gap. And the reason I haven't got a lot of slides is that probably every single one of you on this call has either personally experienced the gender pay gap, is currently experiencing the gender pay gap, if you are in paid employment, or you know or care about somebody who has as well. So it is, even though they're numbers, it is all our lived experience. And I think that's incredibly important to start our conversation. There are a lot of numbers and words and phrases thrown around. And I just want to just take a moment to kind of give my working definition of them. So, of course, we have equal pay. It is illegal and has been illegal for nearly exactly the same time that I have been alive. The Equal Pay Act came into force just a few days after I was born. Was, as many of us know, not really enforced, but it does say if you are doing the same work as somebody else, you cannot be paid differently. And I don't think anyone would disagree about that. But then we all get a bit confused because for me, the next step, of course, and all of you will be very aware of this, is pay equity. So that is people getting paid the same amount for work of the same value. And I think that's the key piece because in our society, unfortunately, or fortunately, or however you think about it, how we choose to value each other is through the dollar that we put on each other's labor. So pay equity is essentially about equal value for equal value of equal work. And obviously, many of you would have been through that process where we create frameworks where we compare and ensure equal pay equity. But today we're going to focus a bit more on another measure, obviously related to the other two, but it's the gender pay gap. And it's, I think, a really important tool. Essentially, for me, it is a measure of the gender equity within an organization. So the number that is sitting there represents who's in leadership roles and who's not, who gets the highly paid and highly valued roles, who gets hired, who gets promoted, who gets the benefit. In technical terms, most of you will know that the gender pay gap is calculated as the difference between the median man's wage and the median woman's wage. So in an organization or even in the country, Stats does this, they stack us all up and find the two medians and find the difference. So if we have lots and lots of women in lowly paid jobs and not accessing perhaps the leadership, we get very, very large gender pay gaps. And of course, if we have organisations with that put a high value on certain roles, often those are roles that, again, women are not in, you end up with very large gender pay gaps. So it really does tell a story about value, but it is also a story about choices within organizations that is within control of those who lead those organizations, which is why we've been focusing on the gender pay gap. The data's there. The 5.2% has been a drop from last year, but again, the clever research scientists have looked, why did we get a big drop in the gender pay gap? And you would have seen their commentary, essentially a whole lot of low-paid women lost their jobs. There's a much higher unemployment for women at the moment, which means the median rose for women and the men stayed the same. That does not suggest in any way our organisations are more gender equal. It tells a story of women taking the brunt of recession. We also see in that figure the result of some very large pay equity settlements in the previous year in some very large woman-dominated areas. So I would put, if I was a betting woman, and I pretty much probably am, I would say that it is going to go up again. Particularly if we do come out of this recession and women are starting to be employed again, we're just going to have it bounce back up. But what that 5.2 for me hides is the disaggregated data. Wahine Māori, 12%, and our Pacific sisters, nearly 16%. Imagine if you think about your hourly wage or the salary you're getting this week and essentially give 16% of it away or just don't get 16% based on your gender and ethnicity. It feels like a pretty big tax to be a Pacific woman in our country. And I do like the statistics again, the Pākehā man earning, and it just puts it into real terms. For me, this is the ability to be able to provide for your family, the ability to make choices, and of course, the ability to retire well. The way I think about it, the pay equity processes, which are so critical, because again, we have different types of work being valued, and of course, we know historically there's no denying it. Certain industries that have that women tend to work in have been less valued. For me, a lot of the pay equity processes are about fixing historical underpayment. Like it's creating redress for things that have gone wrong over literally decades and decades. But for me, the gender pay gap can also help prevent future ones, which is why I think it's so important because it is a measure of I guess, the choices that are being made today within organizations. The research shows that it isn't the characteristics of women that are driving the gender pay gap. It is not anything to do with how educated we are, how experienced we are, how many hours we work, or even the roles that we choose. It is 80% of the gender pay gap is driven by firm-based decisions, which means we can control it, which is quite exciting. It is the pay choices that are made within organizations. Now, across the world, many jurisdictions have lent into the gender pay gap for a whole raft of reasons, because it's the fair and right thing to do, that our organisations are gender equal is the fair and right thing to do. Also, many because the gap represents inefficiency. If you've got women who are in the talent and the skills and experience isn't being used as well as it should be, you are creating inefficiency in your labour markets and economies. And that's been an argument that's run particularly in the European Union. And you will see increases in productivity should you put energy into reducing gender pay gaps. It means that there's a better, more equal and more better use of essentially of human resources within organisations. The EU even went so far as to work on the gender pay gap. Why they prioritised it is it was a key measure to reduce child poverty, because of course it's not children who are poor, it is usually their mothers. And their EU directive that I will talk about in a minute, they reckon they're going to reduce child poverty by 2 to 3% just by focusing on the gender pay gap. But any work on the gender pay gap usually creates more value for those in the least paid jobs. So the thing that internationally that has worked best, the thing that creates the most change and the policy that is being most evaluated and most effective is pay transparency, which is pay gap reporting. So most countries in the world have done this. Even the Aussies have been doing it for 2 years. The UK for about 10. All member states of the European Union have to, and half of OECD countries. So we're really behind the 8 ball here and that New Zealand women don't have the protection of the transparency of firm level data about the gender pay gap. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So if the government today made the gender pay gap reporting, so this is essentially large businesses once a year having to publish their gender pay gap data, the gender pay gap would shrink by 20 to 40%. And international research shows that that'll probably happen in the first 18 months. So this is an incredible thing, and we even know how it will work. We'll get more women recruited and promoted. We'll get compressed salaries, so you start to get the bosses being paid relative to staff. We know that women will get bumps when pays have been unjustified, and often men's wages are growing faster than women's, and that becomes equalised. So that's what will happen in organisations. At the moment, we also know from Ministry of Women Research published last year that 40% of New Zealand businesses have never calculated their gender pay gap. That is where the gender pay gap sits in New Zealand at the moment. And that is where particularly Wahine Māori and Pacific women are bearing the brunt of that lack of calculation. We also know that 95% of businesses have the data, they have gender data, they can do this, and the large businesses have got payroll systems that actually automatically calculate your gender pay gap. So it's not like it's a hard thing to do. I'm still minding the gap because we are still minding the gap. We calculated what is the cost to us each week of the government not introducing pay gap reporting. So this is the cost to us of inaction. It is the cost to us of not being able to receive the benefits and of that 20 to 40%, and essentially the protection we would all get from pay gap reporting. And for a New Zealand woman today earning the median wage, she is losing $25.36 per week. That is what the gender pay gap, 20 to 40% costs her. For Wahine Māori, it's nearly $60. And again, for our Pacific sisters, it's nearly $80 a week. That comes up to nearly $5,000 a year. Just think about what that would make a difference for these families. So it is an incredibly simple piece of legislation. The bill is sitting there. We just need six government MPs to back it. It will be pulled and read, and in a few months we could all have that benefit, and this money could be going back into these women's and their families' pockets. So I don't know about you, when we start to crank it, I get a bit angry, but I'm not going to do today because it's a lovely sunny day and you're all lovely people. But we've created a campaign that we launched yesterday at Still Minding the Gap. If you go to our website, you will see a very large button that says Invoice the Prime Minister. You push it, it generates an email, sends straight to the Prime Minister, and essentially we're invoicing him for the money that we are losing this week. Feel free to do it every week because we are losing this money every week. So please do that. And I can tell you, we haven't released it yet, but we've had literally thousands and thousands of invoices because we have a mechanism on our website to know literally thousands and thousands of invoices went yesterday, and we would like even more to go. There's only so long he can ignore us, Belinda, don't you think? But yes, this is one action we can do. Please pass it on. Please do it. And we will be working incredibly hard to get a reason why we don't get this protection, given that it's such an easy, well-tested and internationally accepted way of dropping the gender pay gap. But there's also other actions that potentially you may want to do with your colleagues. And one of them is to ask your employer, if you don't know already, what the gender pay gap is for your area. And I would also be looking at what their plan is around the gender pay gap. So even if you have the gender pay gap published, and some of you will be in public agencies where that happens, I'd be wanting to know the details of the plan behind it. And if you, in all the research I've done over the last nearly decade, if you pick up some rocks essentially in your organizations, you will find the squiggly things. The squiggly things are around promotions, the percentage of women who are being promoted in your organization versus the percentage of men and how that is relative to the gender makeup of your organization is a question I would be asking. Also, who gets opportunity to development and training opportunities? How are your training and development budgets spent? And also, one of the largest areas we know of the gender pay gap is in what I would call benefits. Who gets access to overtime? Who gets actually what performance bonuses? And who gets essentially the nice things is incredibly gender specific. And a lot of the research shows that the gender pay gaps in those benefits can be 20, 30, 40%. So if you are interested in, I would do it in safety in numbers, or do it through your unions. That's the kind of thing I'll be asking. What's your gender pay gap? What's your plan? How does our promotion work, and how are our training and development and benefits divided? That will give you a really good insight into where essentially a lot of the gender inequality happens. I'd also remind you, thanks to, again, I think I've been spending a bit of time in this space working. We managed to get the pay gag, essentially the pay gag law through. It is now legal to be able to talk about your money, that your employer cannot gag you. And I think we need to do that more often. I think the more often we normalize talking about pay, that we talk about how we're negotiating if we are on individual contracts, about what kind of conditions we have, and particularly doing this in front of our young women. I think this is something we all need to do. So, say in safety in numbers, I think we can create change within our organisations, given at the moment the gender pay gap sits at the level of the firm. It sits at the level of the team manager, essentially, across New Zealand. And perhaps if we've got an opportunity to be able to do that, and perhaps if you are a team leader, I'm sure you've had a look at your salary data and ensure that you can justify all the differences in pay there. But that's from me. Please invoice the Prime Minister. Please tell him that the gender pay gap is something that matters to you, and you'd really like the money that you are losing back. Please. We had a lovely lady come through to us, and she said, could I backdate it for the last 40 years? She was just about to retire, and we told her that was a great idea. But I know we've got some questions, Belinda, and I'm really interested to hear from others as well.